My daughter came to the hospital where I was staying at for a few days. I was falling asleep in my room when a nurse suddenly woke me up. Thinking something was wrong, I headed down to the waiting room, but then I saw my daughter, who was supposed to be at home. Even from a distance, I could see she was shivering with cold. I ran to her. She was shaking and looking very pale. "What in the world are you doing here all alone, sweetheart? Don't tell me you walked all the way from home." The nurse gave her some warm milk, and I waited until she calmed down and asked her, "What's wrong with Daddy?" I was mortified to hear my daughter tell me everything she knew about the story, and she was teary-eyed all the while. This is the story of how poor parenting can have a huge impact on the image of parents for a child, and how my daughter helped me see the truth about my husband and act accordingly to punish him. My name is Hannah, and I'm 38 years old. I used to be a government employee working at City Hall like my husband, but I quit my job when I was pregnant. After the summer vacation of my child, who's now in the 5th grade of elementary school, I started working part-time as a cashier at a local supermarket 3 days a week. My husband's name is Chris, and he's 2 years older than me. He's a government employee and has risen quickly in the ranks for his age and is highly regarded within the government office as a person who can do a good job, no matter what kind of task you give him. Give him a difficult assignment or an aggressive customer or a hardwire malfunction, he was your guy. Not to say everyone took him for granted. He did his main job with only a couple of easy favors here and there, scattered throughout the week. Everyone respected him well. Chris and I met at work, where I was 2 years his junior, and I admired him. My husband also became interested in me because of my adoration for him, and he eventually confessed he had feelings for me. A year later, we got married, and soon after that, we were blessed with a daughter. We named her Lydia, and she is now 10 years old. She is a complete mommy's girl and is still a bit spoiled by yours truly. There's a genuine reason why she's a mommy's girl, and it's because I was drooling over her, as many parents do. I love her so much, but I know what boundaries to set. I say spoiled when I really mean I give her all the love and warmth she wants and needs. And this is because of the way her daddy raised her. He used to kick her out of the house and make her stand at the door as a form of discipline from an early age. And the reasons were often laughably trivial, like she knocked over a cup of tea and spilled it everywhere or forgot to put away one of her toys. At first, I was surprised at the behavior of Chris's parenting and asked him why. But he acted as if he didn't mean any harm. He even told me,
"She deserves to be kicked out if she did something wrong."
He didn't seem like the kind of person who would do something like that from the time we were dating until now, so I got worried and talked to my in-laws about it. "Hannah, I'm so sorry." "Wait, what?" According to my in-laws, the reason Chris did this is because my father-in-law, Mr. Clementine, used to discipline his son in the same way when he was a child. He and his wife used to fight a lot about this way of parenting, and he admitted he actively tried to change his strategies. He also said he never thought about the possibility that what he had done would affect his granddaughter now, and he was very apologetic about it. I understood my husband's situation, but whatever the reason, I don't think what he's doing is good for our daughter. After we got home from my in-laws' house, I had a talk with my husband, and he promised me that from now on he would never kick my daughter out of the house or make her stand outside again. I was reassured that everything was going to be okay. However, my thinking was extremely naive. For when I started working part-time, Chris's bad habits started to appear again. I noticed it on the day of the first snowfall in December, when I was changing in my locker after my shift at work. A fellow part-timer who was about to start hers came sprinting toward me at a very fast pace. She was breathless when she got to where I stood, and when I asked her what was the matter, she said that because she was on a bicycle, she only saw her for a moment. But when she passed by my house on her way to work, she saw Lydia standing outside all alone. I didn't think it was possible, but when I rushed home in a panic, I did indeed find her standing outside the front door just as she had said. And the front door was locked, so she couldn't get back in herself. "Sweetheart, why are you outside?" "Hey, Mommy, you're home!" I hurriedly unlocked the door and went into the room with my daughter to find Chris sleeping in a heated room. "What are you thinking?" He jumped up, startled by my loud voice, and looked at me with an awkward expression on his face. "What do you think you're doing, kicking Lydia out in this cold weather?"
"It couldn't be helped, Hannah. I'm doing this for her sake, you know."
"What about this is for her sake, for crying out loud? What if she catches a cold, or worse, pneumonia?"
"Shut up. Lydia did something she wasn't supposed to, and I disciplined her as should be."
"What the hell did Lydia do to deserve getting kicked out of the house in this forbidding weather? In any case, you promised you wouldn't kick her out again."
I made no such promise. This is between me and Lydia, and I suggest you keep your nose out of it and don't tell me what to do. I don't feel too good. I need me some fresh air.
Chris didn't come home that day. After he stormed out of the house, I talked to Lydia, and she told me that he had been kicking her out of the house whenever I wasn't around. She also told me that he had let her back inside just before I came home, and that he had even told her not to talk to me about any of the stuff he'd been doing to her, but that today just happened to be the day he had fallen asleep on the couch and quite forgot his daughter was outside. Then I came home and things transpired the way you just witnessed. Lydia also told me that she was kicked out for the most trivial of reasons. That day, she merely told her daddy that his clothes smelled really nice. How in the world was that something she wasn't supposed to do? We were teaching her that giving other people compliments can make someone feel better than one might think. Why? Chris himself gave a perfectly good example the previous week when we were at a friend's place for dinner by telling the man of the house he really likes his cologne. She literally just said the same thing, all with good intention, and she was punished for it. That was just plain stupid. Not only that, but whenever I went to work on his days off, he also said he had to go to work too, so he often left Lydia at home alone. Of course, I never asked him to work on his days off, and his job is not the kind of job that requires him to work on his days off. After this particular incident, I became afraid to leave my daughter alone with her father. His habit of kicking his daughter out of the house as a form of discipline has not gotten better, but on the contrary, it seems to have gotten worse. I quit my part-time job a few days later so that it would never happen again. I'll stay home now, Lydia, okay? I had sound reasons, but for some reason, Chris didn't like my course of action, and we argued again about the situation.
Hannah, why did you quit your part-time job, huh? You never even confided in me about quitting. You just went and frickin' did it.
Because I can't leave Lydia here alone with you because of the discipline you give her. I won't allow my daughter to be left outside in the cold when you're indoors enjoying the warmth and comfort of home.
We're talking about this again? Let me remind you that I'm the one who feeds you and the little brat with my money. Don't talk big to me when you can't even make enough to pay for your own freaking food.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Clementine? You've been spending a lot of money lately because you're the section chief. Just the other day, you bought thousands of dollars worth of sneakers that have nothing to do with your work, but still claiming that it was important. To top it off, I've never seen you wear them. What does that have to do with being the section chief of City Hall, eh?
Shut up. I'm free to spend my money however I want. I resent you telling me what to do with my money, you money-grubbing bitch.
I don't think Chris had any idea whose fault it was that I quit my job. After repeated arguments, our marriage had completely cooled off and the thought of divorce began to cross my mind. Even so, since I quit my part-time job, Chris never kicked my daughter out of the house, and he started coming home late. So Lydia's time together with her father became increasingly sparse. On the rare occasions that she did interact with him, she seemed very comfortable and didn't seem to avoid him or dislike him in any discernible way. I hadn't been able to come to a decision about my future with Chris because I was usually like that. I tended to put off important decisions until they became crucial for my life. And this was a delicate matter because I hadn't told Lydia about the possibility of divorcing her father, and I had no idea how she would react to such a drastic change in her life. But one day the worst thing imaginable occurred. Lydia was at school that day and I was going to the supermarket. As I was walking into the parking lot in front of the store, the sports bag of a passing cyclist snagged onto the shoulder strap of my handbag, and the sudden force sent me flying a couple of meters. I sprained my wrist, suffered a few scrapes, and hit my head against the ground, so I had to be hospitalized for examination. I didn't want to be away from home, given the concerns I had with Chris and Lydia, so I tried to refuse the hospitalization, but doctors insisted, so I had no choice but to be admitted. I was in the hospital for 4 or 5 days. When I reluctantly called Chris about my predicament, he actually did the kindest thing and left work early and brought me a change of clothes right away. And that's not all. He even brought me my favorite sweets.
You stay in the hospital until you were completely healed, okay, honey? I was so worried when you called. You didn't sound too good. And from what you told me, your wrist was pretty messed up. But I'm glad it was just a mild sprain.
It had been a long time since he had said such kind words to me. Thank you so much, honey. And about Lydia.
I know, don't worry. I'll take good care of her, and I promise you I won't do anything.
Those words made me so happy that I almost cried. And I felt like he was trying his best to take care of me, as if he was genuinely worried about me being in the hospital. Thanks to Chris, I no longer had any worries about being hospitalized. But I was naive to think so optimistically, and my fears up until that day were completely justified. The examinations had gone well, and all I had to do was wait for getting the thumbs up to be dismissed from the hospital. I was falling asleep in my room when a nurse suddenly came to wake me up. Thinking something was wrong, I followed the nurse, heading down the hallway to the waiting room, practically sleepwalking, wondering what was going on at this time of night. But then I saw my daughter, who was supposed to be at home. Even from a distance, I could see she was shivering with cold. I ran to her. She was shaking and looking very pale. "Lydia, is that you?" "Mommy, help me, please." The nurse found her wandering in front of the entrance at night when she couldn't get into the hospital because it was past open hours, and she took her into protective custody. It would have taken an hour to get from our house to the hospital on a child's feet. The nurse gave Lydia a large mug of warm milk, and after I waited for her to calm down, I asked her, "What in the world are you doing here all alone, sweetheart? Don't tell me you walked all the way from home. What happened to your dad? Was everything okay at home?" She started talking quietly. "Mommy, he brought his friend home every day." "His friend?" "Yeah, and she smelled really nice. She smelled just like his clothes." From what my daughter told me, it seems that while I was in the hospital, Chris was bringing a woman home every day, neglecting our daughter in the process by not feeding her properly, kicking her outside at the slightest disapproval, and generally depriving her of any necessities to protect her from the cold and darkness. "Why did you come to the hospital tonight?" "I just felt lonely. He said that if I didn't go to sleep like a good girl, I could find somewhere else to be for the night. That's what I did." "I know, honey, it was scary and cold, I know, but it's all right now." I felt an extreme tightness in my chest. I then realized that when I first informed Chris that I was going to be in the hospital for a while, his kindness wasn't because he was genuinely worried about me, but rather because he could actually bring home a woman whom he was cheating on me with, and he was just trying to deceive me into believing everything would be okay. I thought he was doing everything for me and Lydia, but I will never forgive him for the way he treated her and for his betrayal of me. "Mommy, I don't want to go home. Daddy's scary." I hugged my daughter tightly, and that's when I noticed she was very hot and clearly had a fever. I didn't leave my daughter's side even for a moment until she fell asleep, and right after she went to bed, I called my in-laws. When I told them the gist of the general situation, they immediately rushed to the hospital. I asked Mrs. Clementine to stay in charge of my daughter, while in the meantime, Mr. Clementine would come home with me because I had just recovered from a few injuries. They were happy to oblige, of course, and Mr. Clementine drove me straight home. On the way, I couldn't stop thinking about my daughter, and I couldn't stop being furious at Chris for doing this. When we arrived at the house, Mr. Clementine and I entered quietly so that my husband and the adulterous woman wouldn't hear us. At the door were the woman's shoes, which were the sneakers that Chris had bought some time ago. The same ones that had cost thousands of dollars. He had bought all this stuff for a date with the cheating woman? This is getting more and more scandalous, I thought. I suppressed the boiling blood rushing to my head, opened the door to the bedroom where I knew they'd be, and sure enough, they were in the middle of having sex.
What the frick is going on here?
Before I could make a move, Mr. Clementine grabbed my husband by the chest, actually lifted him out of bed, and launched him into the air. Chris steadied himself against the bedroom desk, and he turned around with a look of horror on his face.
Dad? What are you doing here? And you, Hannah? You're supposed to be in the hospital.
He was completely flustered by the sudden turn of events. Hey, mind explaining to me what exactly has been going on lately?
What do you mean, explain? I don't know what you're talking about.
I was so getting frustrated as he mumbles on and on. Do you know where Lydia is right now?
Where's Lydia? Why, she's sleeping, of course.
Yes, she is sleeping, but do you know where exactly? Don't tell me you didn't even notice that she was gone. Listen, bucko, Lydia is in the hospital right now. She went there alone in the cold to ask me for help. Why did you frickin' tell her to leave, damn it?
Because, well...
If you don't tell me in 5 seconds, I'll turn you into the police. Then Chris finally became reasonable and started to confess everything to me.
Listen to me. She's the one who's been begging for you, saying, I want my mommy, I want my mommy, I want my mommy, blah. It was getting so freaking annoying. I told her to go to bed tonight, but she wouldn't listen to me. I'm under a lot of stress myself, you know.
What the frick? I don't understand why you're stressed out. You just wanted to do this with this Miss Universe here tonight, so you put her to bed early. That's what you did. You're a failure as a father.
No, I'm not.
And you didn't frickin' prepare her meals properly. What kind of nerve does a man have to leave his own daughter alone as he cheats on his wife and does the unspeakable with another woman? If you have a reasonable explanation as to why you frickin' did that, well, speak up. I was so upset that he couldn't even conjure up the nerve to speak to me. Oh yeah, As for you there, I'll never forgive you either. The reason he was coming home late and working on holidays was so he could have an affair with you? That's really fricked up. I'm going to charge you alimony, so I suggest you prepare yourself. The cheating woman almost cried out of fear, but that was nothing compared to the horror my daughter had just experienced the night before. Chris and the adulterous woman are completely defeated and don't seem to want to say anything at all anymore, let alone argue. But Mr. Clementine and I were still furious.
Don't you worry. I'll take this son of a bitch to the police station myself. Now wait a damn minute. I've already told you everything. Now I should be innocent. That's not the frickin' point. You need to realize what you've done. It's your frickin' fault to begin with, Dad. You did the same things to me all those years ago, kicking me out of the house at the slightest mishap for hours on end. You are to blame for my poor parenting. Yeah, I know. All the more reason I have to educate you properly now. I'm sorry, Hannah. This is all my responsibility too. So I'll take this bastard into police custody.
With that said, Chris was half-assedly taken away by his father. I then got rid of the adulterous woman, and Mr. Clementine and I were back at the hospital before my daughter woke up. Chris was officially investigated by the police, and Lydia and I were subjected to a number of interviews. Lydia seemed to be a little intimidated at first, but the police were very kind to her and made her feel like she was safe from her dad. He was convicted of extortion and child abandonment and sentenced to 1 year in prison. Considering what he did to our daughter, I thought it was too short a punishment, but I'm really glad that he was punished nevertheless. The woman whom he was having an affair with dumped him soon after, and his fate was that he was confronted by me with divorce papers and demands for alimony and child support. As for the alimony and child support, Mr. Clementine had voluntarily shouldered the burden of paying them because his son had spent a lot of money on the adulterous woman and he was serving a prison sentence. Mr. Clementine told me that he would make sure that my ex-husband would pay him back when he finished his sentence, so, needless to say, Chris has quite the life waiting for him once he's out of prison. I also filed a claim for alimony against the adulterous woman through a lawyer. I heard that this woman was quite a gold digger, for she had been getting rich men to pay her tribute, and right when she was having an affair with Chris, she was unemployed and completely depended on him providing for her. There was no way she could pay alimony without a job, and no man would ever volunteer to pay the alimony for her. She's been going to numerous job-hunting facilities for the past few weeks now, desperately looking for a job. I don't care about her life, but I just want her to pay the alimony as she promised. And as for me, as soon as I got back to the hospital, I apologized to the nurse for my selfish behavior. It was especially inappropriate because the date had changed as we were taking care of everything and it was my discharge day. The nurse did not scold me, but instead welcomed me warmly. I guess the nurse couldn't scold me because of the circumstances. After leaving the hospital, we returned to the house, but only to pack our belongings. Not long after that, my daughter and I moved into an apartment near the school. The house we had been living in was owned by Mr. Clementine, who sold it and rented the apartment to us. In addition, he arranged for me to get a full-time job at a company owned by a friend of his. My father-in-law said it was atonement for his sins, but all I could do was thank him. He had been very helpful when I confronted his son for his actions, and he had helped me get back on my feet to support myself and Lydia. I mean, if that isn't a savior, I don't know what is. As for my daughter, she was a bit depressed at first after our divorce, but she's not too old to understand what my ex-husband did to her. She seems to be accepting reality in her own way nowadays, and before long, her mental state improved, and she's back to her normal self. She comes to my office on her way home from school every day now and is loved by the president with all the other employees, so she's doing pretty well, I think. When I see her smiling face, I truly feel that confronting her father was definitely the right thing to do. I'm sure that the future will be bright for my daughter as she grows up under the watchful eye of me and everyone I trust.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.